The Nazis weren't just building tanks, they were hunting for weapons that could bend reality itself. While the world watched armies march across Europe, Hitler's inner circle dispatched secret expeditions to forgotten caves, remote temples, and hidden monasteries, searching for relics that shouldn't exist. 7 ancient secrets became obsessions for the Third Reich. What did they believe these artifacts could do? The answer reveals a regime that feared mystical defeat more than military loss. Before Indiana Jones made it famous, one man devoted his life to finding the Grail for the SS. Otto Rahn wasn't a soldier, he was a poet, a romantic, a scholar obsessed with medieval heresy and Arthurian legend. The SS Ahnenerbe, Himmler's occult research division, recruited him in 1935 with a singular mission: prove the Holy Grail existed, locate it, and bring it to Germany. Rahn believed the Grail wasn't hidden in Jerusalem or Rome. It was buried somewhere in the Pyrenees Mountains of southern France, protected by the Cathars, a medieval Christian sect the Catholic Church had systematically massacred in the 13th century. But why would the Nazis care about a heretical cup from Christian mythology? Because Rahn's research suggested something far more dangerous. The Grail predated Christianity entirely. He theorized it was a pagan stone of power, a relic from an ancient Aryan religion that Christ's followers had stolen and concealed. For 3 years, Rahn explored Montségur Castle, the Cathars' final stronghold before their annihilation in 1244. Local legends claimed that just before the fortress fell, 4 Cathars escaped through secret mountain tunnels, carrying their most sacred treasure. Rahn interviewed elderly villagers, studied crumbling medieval manuscripts, descended into labyrinthine caves carved beneath the peaks. His book, Crusade Against the Grail, argued that the Cathars weren't just Christian heretics. They were guardians of pre-Christian wisdom, keepers of a Holy Grail that granted not salvation, but sovereignty over spiritual forces themselves. The SS funded his expeditions lavishly. They wanted more than a relic. They wanted proof that Germanic peoples had accessed divine knowledge superior to Judeo-Christian traditions. If the Grail existed and was Aryan in origin, it validated their entire racial cosmology. It meant their ancestors had touched the sacred without Mediterranean intermediaries, without Roman corruption, without Jewish prophets. But Rahn found nothing, no Grail, no treasure. Just fragments of stories, mysterious symbols carved into stone, and the growing realization that he'd become a propaganda tool for a regime he couldn't escape. In 1939, under circumstances still debated today, Otto Rahn died in the Austrian mountains, officially ruled a suicide by exposure, though many historians believe the SS silenced him when he failed to deliver their miracle. Yet the search didn't end with Rahn's death. The Grail remained on Himmler's priority list until Berlin fell in 1945. Why such relentless obsession over a medieval myth? Because the Nazis understood something the modern world dismisses. Symbols become power when enough people believe. And if they could claim the Grail, they'd claim the ultimate symbol of divine right to rule. Deep in Germany's Teutoburg forest, 5 massive sandstone pillars rise from the earth like frozen giants. Externsteine had been a curiosity for centuries. Medieval hermits carved chambers into the rock. Christian reliefs adorned its surfaces. Pilgrims visited its chapels. But when Nazi archaeologists arrived in 1933, they saw something far older beneath the crosses. They saw the cosmic engine of their ancestors. Heinrich Himmler became obsessed with Externsteine after reading fringe theories claiming the site was a pre-Christian Germanic temple aligned with celestial events. Not just any temple, the spiritual center of ancient Aryan civilization, a place where their ancestors performed rituals to harness cosmic forces directly. Why would natural rock formations matter to a regime building concentration camps? Because the Nazis believed reality itself could be bent through sacred geometry and ancestral connection. The Ahnenerbe dispatched teams to study every angle, every carving, every shadow the stones cast during solstices and equinoxes. They measured alignments to stars, searched for hidden chambers, analyzed the rock's magnetic properties. One pillar contained a circular window that perfectly framed the summer solstice sunrise. a feature the Nazis claimed proved ancient Germanic knowledge of astronomy rivaling Egypt or Babylon. Here's what made Externsteine truly essential to Nazi ideology. If proven to be a pagan power site, it would validate their entire racial mythology. They needed evidence that Aryan ancestors possessed advanced spiritual technology, that Christianity had violently suppressed Germanic cosmic wisdom, that reclaiming these sites could restore supernatural abilities to the German people. Wilhelm Teut, the chief archaeologist assigned to Externsteine, published elaborate theories connecting the stones to Irminsul, the mythical world tree pillar that ancient Saxons worshipped before Charlemagne destroyed it in 772 CE. Teut claimed Externsteine was the actual location of Irminsul, making it the holiest site in all of Germanic paganism. The SS began planning massive renovations, removing Christian additions, restoring what they imagined was its original pagan glory, transforming it into a pilgrimage destination for the new Reich. They held ceremonies there, solstice gatherings where SS officers in runic regalia performed reconstructed ancient rites based on guesswork and nationalist fantasy. Himmler himself visited multiple times, standing before the stones as if communing with ancestral spirits. What did they think would happen? Did they believe the stones could awaken dormant racial memories, channel power from their imagined Aryan gods? Modern archaeology has found no evidence that Externsteine was ever a pagan temple. The celestial alignments the Nazis obsessed over were likely coincidental. The chambers were demonstrably medieval, not ancient. The site's only confirmed historical use was Christian, nothing more. Yet the Nazi investment reveals their fundamental insecurity. Without mystical validation, their ideology was just politics and violence. They needed cosmic proof. They needed their ancestors to speak through stone and confirm what science couldn't, that they were chosen by forces beyond human judgment. Externsteine became a symbol not of what the Nazis found, but what they desperately needed to exist, a portal to a mythical past that could justify their apocalyptic future. And if this exploration of Nazi occult obsessions is opening your eyes to how dangerous pseudoscience becomes when weaponized by ideology, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what comes next gets even stranger. While most associate Nazi occultism with German paganism, their strangest expedition ventured far beyond the fatherland, into the frozen forests of Finland and Soviet Karelia, searching for something that made even hardened SS officers uneasy. They called it the witch hunt, but they weren't looking to burn witches. They were trying to recruit them. In 1935, the Ahnenerbe organized a covert research mission to Finnish Karelia, a remote region straddling the Soviet border where ancient Finno-Ugric shamanic traditions had survived Christianity's reach. The team's objective wasn't archaeological. It was psychological and paranormal. They'd heard rumors of Karelian Tietäjät, traditional folk magicians who claimed abilities that sounded impossible: weather control, healing through incantation, prophetic dreams, and most intriguingly, the power to harm or kill through focused mental energy alone. Why would the Nazis care about Finnish folk magic? Because their occult researchers believed these practices preserved fragments of ancient Aryan psychic abilities that modern civilization had suppressed. If they could document, study, and potentially weaponize these techniques, they'd gain an advantage no conventional army could counter. Soldiers who could kill with thought, officers who could divine enemy positions, a Führer who could bend reality through will alone. The expedition team recorded hundreds of hours of interviews with elderly practitioners, documenting spells, chants, and ritualistic practices passed down through generations. They paid particular attention to the rune singers, shamans who entered trance states and claimed to journey to the spirit world for knowledge. The Nazis filmed these ceremonies, analyzed the linguistic patterns of their songs, measured the singers' vital signs during trance, desperately searching for physiological changes that might explain supernatural claims. One practice especially fascinated them: Keroaminen, the art of the curse. Karelian witches reportedly could cause illness, madness, or death through focused malevolent intention combined with specific verbal formulas. The researchers collected detailed accounts of successful curses, interviewed alleged victims, and tried to establish reproducible patterns. Could hatred itself become a weapon if properly ritualized and directed? But the expedition faced problems their authority couldn't solve. The Karelian practitioners refused to share their deepest secrets with obvious foreigners. Some fled deeper into the wilderness when the Germans arrived. Others gave deliberately false information, sensing these weren't genuine scholars, but predators hunting something they shouldn't possess. The Soviet border also limited access. Much of historical Karelia lay behind Stalin's lines, and locals trusted Nazi researchers even less than Soviet commissars. The team returned to Germany with recordings, photographs, and pages of documented spells, but no proof that any of it actually worked. They couldn't reproduce the effects in controlled settings. The curses didn't kill German test subjects. The healing chants didn't cure laboratory-induced illnesses. The weather remained indifferent to ritual commands. Yet Himmler archived everything meticulously, convinced that with proper understanding, these primitive techniques could be refined into modern supernatural warfare. What terrified the Nazis most wasn't that Karelian magic might be real. It was the possibility that other nations might weaponize it first. If the Soviets harnessed these ancient practices, how could conventional forces respond? The witch hunt revealed the regime's core paranoia, that invisible powers could determine history's outcome, and they were racing against time to claim them. In 1938, while Europe held its breath before inevitable war, 5 German scientists embarked on the strangest diplomatic mission in Nazi history. Their destination, Tibet, the isolated kingdom at the roof of the world. Their official purpose, zoological and anthropological research. Their actual mission, to prove that Tibetans descended from ancient Aryan supermen who had migrated from Atlantis. Ernst Schaefer led the expedition, but the real architect was Heinrich Himmler, whose obsession with racial origins had reached cosmic proportions. Himmler subscribed to a fringe theory claiming that the Aryan race originated not in Europe, but in a vanished northern civilization, sometimes called Hyperborea, sometimes Atlantis, sometimes Thule. When this mythical homeland was destroyed by cataclysm, survivors supposedly fled to the highest mountains on Earth, the Himalayas. The Nazis believed Tibetan monks guarded ancient knowledge inherited from these Aryan refugees. Not just philosophy, but practical secrets, meditation techniques that unlocked psychic abilities, breathing exercises that extended lifespans, rituals that granted access to higher dimensions of consciousness. If Germans could reclaim this ancestral wisdom, they'd awaken dormant racial abilities and fulfill their evolutionary destiny. Schaefer's team spent months in Tibet, measuring skulls, documenting rituals, filming ceremonies never before seen by Western eyes. They collected over 350 bird specimens and 2,000 plant samples, legitimate science mixed with racial pseudoscience. The real agenda emerged in their obsessive documentation of Tibetan physical features, searching for Nordic characteristics that would validate their migration theory. They gained unprecedented access to monasteries and secured an audience with the Dalai Lama himself, the teenage 14th Dalai Lama, not yet in full power. The Germans presented themselves as admirers of Tibetan spirituality, carefully concealing their true belief that Tibetan Buddhism was a corrupted remnant of superior Aryan mysticism. They wanted to strip away what they saw as Asian contamination to recover the original Nordic esoteric core. The expedition members studied Tibetan cosmology intensely, particularly the concept of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom inhabited by enlightened masters who would one day emerge to transform the world. The Nazis reinterpreted this as racial memory of the Aryan homeland, prophecy of their own 1,000-year Reich. Himmler became convinced that Tibetan monks possessed maps or coordinates to Shambhala's physical location, perhaps hidden in unexplored Himalayan valleys. They returned to Germany in August 1939 with 18,000 meters of film, crates of artifacts, and extensive documentation, but no proof of Aryan ancestry or supernatural powers. Skull measurements revealed nothing exceptional. The ancient texts contained profound philosophy, but no secret technologies. The monks were hospitable, yet guarded their deepest teachings from these strange foreigners who measured heads and asked invasive questions. Yet the expedition succeeded in one perverse way. It gave the Nazis the imagery they craved. Photographs of swastikas in Tibetan temples, an ancient Buddhist symbol, became propaganda tools, visual proof of mystical connections between Tibet and Germany. The films were edited to support Aryan origin theories, regardless of actual evidence. The Tibet Expedition revealed the Nazi paradox. They sought ancient wisdom to validate modernity's most brutal ideology, projected racial supremacy onto cultures they claimed to admire, and when reality contradicted their myths, they simply rewrote reality in propaganda reels and pseudo-scientific reports. The Nazi occult obsession didn't confine itself to Europe or Asia. In 1928, years before Hitler took power, a German engineer named Edmund Kiss stood before the massive stone ruins of Tiwanaku in Bolivia and experienced what he called a revelation. These weren't merely ancient structures, they were proof that an advanced Aryan civilization had once ruled the Andes, destroyed by cosmic catastrophe exactly as his theory predicted. Kiss became one of the Nazi regime's most valued pseudo-scientists because he offered something irresistible, a global narrative of Aryan supremacy, backed by monuments that predated known history. Tiwanaku's famous Gate of the Sun, precisely carved megalithic walls and astronomically aligned structures convinced Kiss that this site was built by Nordic refugees from a cataclysmic event he dated to approximately 11,000 BCE. His evidence? The World Ice Theory, Welteislehre in German, a cosmological framework that claimed the universe was shaped by eternal conflict between ice and fire. Developed by Austrian engineer Hans Herbiger, this theory proposed that planets and moons were made of ice, that catastrophic cosmic collisions periodically destroyed civilizations, and that survivors of these cataclysms were invariably Aryan supermen who re-established civilization wherever they fled. Kiss argued that Tiwanaku sat at 12,500 feet altitude because it was built when the Andes were much lower, before a cosmic event caused the mountains to rise suddenly. This catastrophic uplift supposedly drowned the Aryan builders at Lake Titicaca, preserving their monuments as frozen evidence of Nordic presence in South America. The logic was circular, but appealing to Nazi ideology. Advanced architecture must equal Aryan builders. Therefore, any impressive ancient site proved Aryan global dominance. The regime loved it. Himmler personally supported Kiss's research and published his books through SS channels. World Ice Theory became semi-official Nazi cosmology, despite horrifying actual scientists. Hitler himself reportedly said he would publicly endorse Herbiger's theories when the time was right. Why would a modern government embrace such obvious pseudoscience? Because it served the narrative they needed, that Aryans were the original civilizers of Earth, that their dominance was cosmically ordained, that current supremacy was merely reclaiming ancient rights. Kiss planned elaborate expeditions to Tiwanaku to excavate proof of Nordic features in skeletal remains and inscriptions in Proto-Germanic languages. The war intervened before these missions could proceed at scale, but Nazi archaeological publications continued promoting Tiwanaku as an Aryan monument throughout the 1930s and early 1940s. Modern archaeology has thoroughly debunked Kiss's fantasies. Tiwanaku was built by indigenous Andean peoples. The Tiwanaku culture that flourished from 300 to 1000 CE, with earlier ceremonial use dating back further. The altitude hasn't changed dramatically. The architectural achievements reflect indigenous innovation and engineering brilliance, not European intervention. No Nordic skeletons, no Germanic inscriptions, no cosmic cataclysms timed to Nazi mythology. Yet Tiwanaku reveals how the Nazis weaponized archaeology across continents. They couldn't find proof of Aryan supremacy in legitimate science, so they invented entire cosmologies to explain why legitimate science was wrong. When reality didn't support their racial myths, they declared reality itself corrupted by Jewish physics and Christian historiography. Tiwanaku became whatever they needed it to be, not evidence, but ammunition in a propaganda war disguised as research. Hitler saw it in 1912, years before anyone knew his name. A young, failed artist wandering Vienna's Hofburg Museum encountered a Roman spear behind glass, allegedly the lance that pierced Christ's side during crucifixion. According to everyone who heard him tell the story later, something happened in that moment. Not religious conversion, something darker. He became convinced this spear was the key to supernatural power, and that possessing it would make him invincible. The legend of the Spear of Destiny claimed it granted victory to whoever held it. Constantine, Charlemagne, Frederick Barbarossa, Napoleon all supposedly possessed it at their peaks. But the legend came with a curse. Lose the spear and you lose everything, including your life. For Hitler, this wasn't folklore. This was prophecy and instruction manual combined. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938, one of Hitler's first acts wasn't political or military, it was mystical. He personally ordered the Spear of Destiny transported from Vienna to Nuremberg, where it would be displayed in the Church of St. Catherine alongside the Nazi Reich's crown jewels. This wasn't about museums or cultural heritage. SS guards protected the spear as if it were a weapon more dangerous than any panzer division. Hitler believed the spear's power was both symbolic and literal. Symbolically, possessing Rome's lance legitimized the Third Reich as heir to the Holy Roman Empire, the next iteration of European Christian dominance. But Hitler's interest went beyond symbolism. He subscribed to occult theories claiming the spear contained supernatural properties, perhaps fragments of Christ's blood with alchemical potential, or that it served as an antenna amplifying the wielder's will into reality-shaping force. Himmler's occultists studied the spear extensively, attempting to activate its supposed powers. They analyzed its metallurgical composition, searching for unknown elements. They performed ceremonies with it, trying to channel whatever energy they believed it contained. Some SS rituals allegedly involved blood oaths sworn upon the spear, binding officers to Hitler through what they imagined was the same object that witnessed Christianity's founding moment. The Allies knew about Hitler's obsession. When Nuremberg fell to American forces on April 30, 1945, Lieutenant William Horn secured the spear from its hiding place in a specially constructed vault. Within hours, Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. The timing seemed to fulfill the ancient curse: lose the spear, lose everything. Whether coincidence or cosmic irony, the symbolic weight was undeniable. Modern analysis has determined the Hofburg spear is likely medieval, not Roman. It contains a nail supposedly from the true cross inserted later, but the main blade dates to roughly the 7th or 8th century CE. Not Constantine's spear, not the lance that pierced Christ, just another medieval relic wrapped in mythological attribution. Yet Hitler's belief was real, and belief shaped his decisions. He invaded Austria partially to claim this artifact. He kept it guarded like nuclear secrets. He tied his destiny to an object that may have never touched Christ at all. The Spear of Destiny reveals the Nazi leadership's fundamental vulnerability, their cosmic insecurity. They needed supernatural validation because human justification wasn't enough. They sought magical dominance because conventional power felt insufficient. The spear was a crutch for men who feared, deep down, that history might judge them as nothing more than mortal criminals. The Nazis searched for the Ark of the Covenant. Not metaphorically, not as academic curiosity. They dispatched archaeologists to North Africa and the Middle East, hunting for the biblical artifact described as the Throne of God. The container of Moses' tablets, the weapon that leveled city walls and struck down the unfaithful. Reports from the 1930s describe Ahnenerbe operations in Egypt, Ethiopia, and supposedly even covert expeditions into British-controlled Palestine, all chasing leads about the Ark's location. Some theories placed it beneath Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. Others claimed Ethiopian monks hid it in Axum, where legend said it had rested since the Queen of Sheba's time. The Nazis investigated both possibilities and more, following every rumor, every apocryphal text, every local legend that suggested where this ultimate power object might sleep. Why would the Ark matter to a regime claiming Aryan supremacy over Semitic traditions? Because Nazi occultism was never consistent, it was acquisitive. They wanted every source of power, every relic, every sacred object, regardless of origin. If the Ark could destroy armies as Exodus described, its ethnic origins became irrelevant compared to its tactical potential. Intelligence reports from British and American sources documented Nazi archaeological activities in North Africa that went beyond strategic military concerns. They were digging in places with no tactical value, following patterns that suggested relic hunting rather than battlefield positioning. Some historians believe Hitler's North African campaign served dual purposes, fighting the British and searching for artifacts, including the Ark. They never found it. No Nazi expedition returned with the Ark of the Covenant or credible proof it ever existed beyond scripture. But the search itself revealed the regime's deepest terror. That faith-based power might be real, and someone else might claim it first. 7 ancient secrets, 7 desperate hunts, 0 supernatural weapons actually found. The Nazis searched for the Grail and found caves. They studied Externsteine and found rocks. They interviewed witches who couldn't curse on command. They measured Tibetan skulls that proved nothing. They claimed Tiwanaku for Aryans who never built it. They guarded a medieval spear, believing it was Roman. They hunted an Ark that remained hidden or mythical. Yet here's what makes this chilling, they believed. Himmler genuinely thought these relics would alter reality. Hitler reorganized military campaigns around artifact locations. They diverted war resources to occult research while millions died. The Third Reich collapsed not because mysticism failed them, but because mysticism was never real to begin with. They searched for ancient secrets because their entire worldview was built on a lie too fragile to stand on its own. Every expedition was an admission that politics, military might, and propaganda weren't sufficient. They needed magic to be real because without it, they were just criminals with flags. The artifacts they hunted remain lost, destroyed, or revealed as medieval forgeries. But the desperation that drove the search? That remains a warning. When movements demand cosmic proof, when leaders chase supernatural power, when governments weaponize archaeology, you're not witnessing strength. You're witnessing the terror of those who know, somewhere deep down, that their cause can't survive the light of ordinary truth. So what do you think they would have done if they'd actually found one? Drop your theory below. If this journey through Nazi occult obsessions revealed how dangerous pseudoscience becomes when married to power, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the hidden histories they tried to bury are the ones that matter most.